Yes, sir. Good morning, Guy.
Oh, good morning, Bruce. Well, thank you for calling in. And I think we're running this morning. I don't know if yes, it has run. A story on your announcement that you.
Yeah, I saw it first thing this morning. It looks great. Thank you for doing that.
Oh, you're very welcome. I always like it when the subject of a story says it looks great, because sometimes they don't say that. Sometimes there's 3 seconds of silence and, yeah, about that. Okay, so I'm glad we're not having that conversation. So, Bruce, tell me, first a little bit about yourself, and love to know why you're running. And at some point, I do want to ask you what you think about this fuel dealers registry bill and about climate change and greenhouse gas legislation in general. But go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, sure. Again, I'm Bruce Roy, and I'm running again. I ran in 2024 and running again now for Chittenden Southeast District Senate. It's a 3-seat district, and
what towns does that? What towns and I'm sorry to interrupt, but what towns and cities does that district represent, Bruce?
So it's Bolton, the south end of Burlington, South Burlington, Williston, Charlotte, Shelburne, Jericho, Underhill. I'm probably missing some other. St. George, just off the top of my head, I'm probably missing somebody else, but it's that general area of Chittenden, southeast. But and indeed some.
I didn't realize that the south end of Burlington is part of that. I thought it was sort of just all the suburbs, but okay.
No, wards 5 and 6. It's 70,000 people, 60,000 voters.
Wow. Okay, great. So why are you running, Bruce?
Well, I look at it this way, and Guy, you were alluding to it a few minutes ago about the session, the legislative session that had in 2023, 2004, where the governor was overridden, his veto was overridden 13 times, I think it was.
Yeah.
And I, for some of us, it was, like, God, could it possibly get any worse? This is crazy. And, and then, I tell the people, if you want to visualize it, it's like we were pushed off a cliff, and all we're looking at is rocks down below us. I mean, how could it possibly get any worse? And then there was a big change. The November 2024 happened, and the supermajority was eliminated. That's great. So to go back to that idea of, we're falling off a cliff, accelerating all the time, going to the rocks, and all of a sudden it appears Vermont was handed a parachute. We got a parachute. We got 6 new senators, and we got 18 new representatives from the minority now breaking the supermajority. Yep. And I was like, we're falling, but somebody just handed us a parachute. This is great. We slowed the roll. We're slowing down. But darn it, the rocks are still there. And that's where we are right now, right? I mean, now people are saying, well, it could have been worse. This session got us to, it could have been worse. And I don't think people are happy with that. I'm not happy with that. So what I want to do, is running for the Senate and hopefully picking up 2 or 3 Senate seats for conservatives. We can pick up a majority, and we can start taking it from, it could have been worse to it's going to be a lot better. So that's why I'm running.
Someone once told me, Bruce, that when you're in the minority, you're really just reacting to and hopefully negotiating someone else's policy. But when you're in the majority, you actually get to set the policy. And is that absolutely correct? Wow. Okay.
And a lot of that policy setting happens, within committees. Certainly, the chairpeople of the committees have that, power to discuss current bills, not discuss current bills. Take them down from the wall, put them up on the wall. I mean, that's one of the privileges, if you will, that goes along with a majority party in many of our state governments, and of course, definitely ours.
So what would you do about this climate change legislation that it seems like the Democrats are pushing forward with this, even without a supermajority? What do you think about all this?
So, I put it in the perspective of, how much money are we spending to do these sort of climate bills? And like you said earlier in your conversation, the origin is the Global Warming Solution Act. That seems to be the parent of all these other bills that are coming out, especially, in the 2023-24 session, where a lot of them were passed, the Affordable Heat Act, the Renewable Energy Standard, the Superfund, all these things were passed over the veto of the governor, and now we're kind of stuck with them. And in perspective, if you look at what the Vermont's input into like carbon emissions in the United States, it's incredibly small. But we're pushing ahead with all these laws that are going to put a more unaffordable burden on taxpayers. A lot of these laws generate an increase in utility rates, especially electricity. Some of them are just going to be taxes on fossil fuel use. And certainly it's reasonable to expect Vermont to go forward with responsible climate actions, responsible environmental protections that are in line with, who we are as Vermonters. We've always thought that's important, but we've just got to do it responsibly. So some of these laws that are going on, the one you just mentioned, you talked earlier about, and the ones that are still out there on the shelf really need to be revisited because, Vermont's carbon footprint is incredibly small. And I think we're out of proportion of the amount of legislature, the amount of money that's going to cost to enforce these things. And especially, all these have been brought about as a result of the Global Warming Solution Act. That too was, over the governor's override, over his veto.
And folks, if you want to chime in on this conversation, if you want to join it, if you want to ask Bruce a question, feel free. 802-244-1777. Bruce, as you're just talking to people in this district that you hope to be representing, and I know you're from Williston, what is on people's minds the most? What sort of change are they wanting to see out of Montpelier?
So I think most folks, I know most folks, they're talking to me about getting Vermont back to affordability, and ultimately lends to a discussion about taxes. Taxes. We have an income tax. We have sales tax. Our property taxes. It's to determine what our property taxes are going to go up this year, but certainly they would have been up over double digit if it wasn't for the for the idea that we have some a bucket of money that we're going to buy down the tax rate. Everybody talks to me about that, how unaffordable it's gotten. The property taxes are, people are seriously thinking they're going to have to move. They're going to have to leave. And, the demographic studies that have just come out and the birth rate being lower in Vermont, all those things, that's tragic. That needs to be fixed, Guy. We need to have a growth strategy in the state where we're not dependent on taxing as a result of spending. We need a growth strategy build the tax base and return us to a position where young folks can stay here and the older folks aren't feeling, oh my gosh, how am I going to fill my fuel tank this month? For heat. We've got to get to a decent growth strategy using some common sense. And personally, I think we need more business people in the legislature. I think that'll help.
And what's your background?
So I have two careers that I've finished and retired from. I spent 30 years in the Air Force, 25 of it with the Green Mountain Boys here in Vermont. I retired as a full bird colonel. My last position was as the Mission Support Group commander during the activation after 9/11, and for I think like 7 years past that I was in that, and that was a great position. I had responsibility for most of the base support functions was under my command. I also spent 30 years at IBM. I retired in 2013. I started out as a systems analyst. I kind of moved into an engineering role, became a manager, and the last 10, 12 years of my career at IBM was as a business manager responsible for the kickoff of the IBM Burlington plant here, selling chips outside of IBM. We was captive for the longest time, and then we went OEM, and I was part of that whole business thing right from the start as a salesperson up until finally at the end being a manager of the profit line.
So you're used to talking to people from outside your organization as a salesperson. Huh. That's not a bad skill to have, I imagine.
Nope, that's not a bad skill. And progressing on to a more business development, marketing, business management kind of thing, where I was responsible for negotiations with clients on contracts, and making sure at the time IBM was making money on its products.
Right. So the drug problem, Vermont, especially Chittenden County. Well, actually, I'm not actually sure it's any worse in Chittenden County, as bad as it is, and it is everywhere else. We've just got an awful, awful drug problem. What kind of leadership would you bring to deal with drug crime, drug abuse, drug recovery?
So we've got to get to the heart of the problem, and that's mental health issues. And I think we need to invest more there. To be honest with you, straight up, the injection site they're talking about, I don't think that's a viable thing to spend money on in the state. I mean, being in Burlington, studies have shown these sites are only valuable within a quarter of a mile around the site itself, and then again, it brings its own problems with it, with the cluster folks. I think we've got to I would today take that money and put it to mental health resources, recovery, addiction and control, all that sort of stuff. I think that's where it has to go. And it appears we've made progress. I think I read somewhere, Guy, you can correct me if I'm wrong, there's the opioid death rate has actually dropped over the last 1 or 2 years in Vermont, which is great. And I think and we've done that without, an injection site, safe injection site. That stuff is happening. So we're doing some good things. We got to continue those good things.
Okay. What are some of the other top line issues that you're looking at, Bruce, that you would like to make a difference in Montpelier with?
Everything kind of, my mind, ties back to affordability. It's kind of a vicious circle. It always ends up back to, can we afford this? What's the priorities? That sort of stuff. I really think we've got to tackle head-on property taxes and the education finance system. We all know that it's broken at its heart. We do. And the fact that we're not making hardly any progress in this session is incredibly disappointing. We had heard back in 24 when school budgets were being turned down, that over and over again, that the message was getting to Montpelier, we just can't do this any longer. It's just taking people, the financial insecurity is immense because of unreliable tax rates. What's going to be next year or the year after? And I think businesses see that too and say,
sure.
"Whoa, I don't know how I can plan my future."
Good
tax rates are all over
point,
the place.
Bruce. We have just a few seconds left here. Can you tell us? Do you have a website people can go to?
Yes, sir, I do. It's ROY4VT.org. Roy for Vermont, ROY4VT.org. I put a lot of my policies out there. Okay. You can push a button to send me some money and help me bring some common sense to
thank you, Bruce.
More common sense.
Thank you very much for coming on. We've been talking to Bruce Roy, candidate for Chittenden Southeast. And please stick around, folks, and join us for the second half. You can be the first caller, 244-1777 on Hot Off the Press.